Hello, good morning, and welcome everyone. My name is Anissa Avon, and I'm super excited to welcome you to this edition of Leading in a Crisis Virtual Summit, Actionable Business and HR Strategies for Navigating Crisis and Change. Today's topic, Emotional Agility After Disruption and Crisis, is with expert Cathy Norris. Hello, Cathy.
Hi, Anissa. Hi, everyone.
So glad you're here. Thanks for joining us and being willing to share your expertise with us today.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
So we're going to go ahead and get rolling. This is a timely topic, and I want to say thank you to our sponsors. I want to say thank you to David Whitmarsh and his team of incredibly talented multi-channel marketing experts and HR IT consulting experts. I highly recommend reaching out to them if you have online or offline marketing or outsourcing requirements. I also want to say thank you to Insperity HR that makes a difference. When I reached out to Insperity and said, we're doing this summit and I don't have all the facts yet and I don't know who's going to attend and there's a lot of things I don't know, like, hey, what topics are people going to want to hear? But would you mind throwing in and being a sponsor? They're like, okay, why not? So pretty cool that happened. And then I went back and I said, so what do you think about giving something away for free to our listeners, to our attendees? And they came up with something really of high value. They said, how about a free HR financial analysis report and debrief? What that means is one of our business performance advisor partners over there at Insperity will support you with an HR budget analysis to help you gain insight into the cost burden of being an employer. You perhaps already know that, but the cost burden in 2020, 2021 is very, very different than what your budget probably looked like going into 2020, pre-pandemic. So if that would be supportive, they know that not all of our listeners are a good fit for what Insperity does. They know that it's not just about seeking new clients, but it is also about being of service. And if that would be supportive of you, don't hesitate to take advantage of that. It's turnkeycoachingsolutions.net/HR report. Very quickly, I also want to say thank you to our internal team of strategic planning and consultant and management consultants. They put together a really cool data-driven strategic planning process that takes into account the pivot and the shift that many of our organizations are going to have to consider. Things like supply chain shifts and employee shifts and work from home shifts and even product lines and manufacturing lines and complete changes in our organization. So if you guys are in that place of, okay, now we're reopening for business, but we really also need to look at adjusting our strategic plan, the program is incredibly comprehensive, and I don't want the next thing that I say to diminish its perceived value. But it's not free, but it is the next best thing. It is a name your own price program as our way of supporting our clients and future clients in navigating through this crisis with really actionable strategy facilitation. So give me a call if you want to have a conversation about that. Again, my name is Anissa Avon, and I'm hosting our summit, and my company founded Turnkey Coaching and Development Solutions in 2004. And we are an organizational development firm. We have expert coaches and trainers and strategists in every major metropolitan area in the US and in key hubs globally. What I am most excited and proud of us for right now, though, is our Leading in a Crisis Summit. In a pinch, we came together with experts like Cathy, who instantaneously said, how can I help? What do people need to hear? And we're going to be doing this every Wednesday and Thursday through the end of May. And now we've been asked for some changes in our topics, and we're going to have some also in June. So come back often. Tell me what you want to hear. I'll see if I can't scour the earth to make that happen. So super excited about introducing you guys to Cathy Norris. Cathy is an executive coach, and she holds a master's degree in education and then completed her PhD studies in instructional systems technology from Indiana University. She's a expert in emotional intelligence. She also holds a certification in conversational intelligence, and emotional intelligence and conversational intelligence. You put those two together and you just have a formula for influence and being able to motivate others and being able to be agile, which is what she's going to talk with us today. On top of her quest for personal best, she also comes with 20 years of career experience working in large organizations from AT&T to Walmart. And part of that gave her the ability to integrate her experience into her work as a consultant, into her work as a learning and development advisor from all the work she did as a learning and development manager. So Cathy, I'm going to stop showing my screen. Tell us about you and what we're going to learn today.
Well, I was prepared to tell you about my expertise in emotions, emotional intelligence, and now what I'm going to talk about today, emotional agility. And there actually is a bit of a difference there. Could be even a big difference. Mm-hmm. Emotional intelligence is kind of about knowing your tendencies with emotions, and you can do assessments to find out where you are with that, and then you can change your behavior. Our emotions influence our behavior, and you can manage your behavior. You can, just like any other skill, you can develop your emotional intelligence. And what I'm going to talk about today, emotional agility, has to do with being even more in touch with your emotions, if that makes sense. So you can be aware of your emotions like on this level, and then you can get even more aware of them. And that's what I'm talking about, and being able to go through your emotions more is agilely a word? I don't think it is, but with more agility,
with greater agility.
It's so easy, a greater agility. It's so easy to get stuck or to push them down, those lower emotions. That can derail us later.
I appreciate
if we do that.
I'm excited that this is what you're going to talk about, because I appreciate the distinction between understanding there is awareness about our emotions and there's the ability to have emotional intelligence. But agility means there's a verb, right? We can take that and learn how to be more agile in how we manage those and how we interact with others, which I suspect is what you're going to teach us today.
Yes, I am. I'm going to touch on that. What we can do in this amount of time, and I think you'll get a lot from the experiences we're going to share.
Perfect.
So let me go ahead and ask, I'd love to have everyone on the call. I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm going to ask you to raise your hand if your answer is yes. So everyone on the call, if you just move your mouse down to the bottom, you can see where to raise your hand. My question is, have you ever experienced a crisis or disruption in your life as big as what you're experiencing now in the pandemic?
And yes, okay. We've got several that are like, yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, and it's surprising. There are people, certainly if you've had major disruption in your family, parents dying, especially if that happened when you were young, that is humongous. That's huge.
Well, it looks like we have about 40% who are saying as big as this. Yes, that's it. Those are good numbers.
Yeah. And most of us, or so a little 60% maybe, haven't experienced anything this big. But this is still big. I'm sure we can all agree. And crisis and disruption are life changing. I believe we can all emerge, since we're all experiencing this together globally, I believe we can all emerge from this crisis and disruption stronger than before, and that we're called at this time to learn how to have greater emotional agility. And that means being able to move through crises, move through our emotions with grace and ease. So we can develop that skill we're being asked to do it during this time to meet the future with better solutions using our emotions. So actually, this pandemic is also, it's my second major life disruption as well. Or maybe, you know, if it's your third or fourth, that would be really something. You must be emotionally agile if you're doing that. But let me paint the picture for you of my first crisis. So it's the end of May 2008. And it's less than 2 months before the end of my international assignment in learning and development. I was doing this in Singapore, 18 months, getting ready to leave my assignment in a month. And at the same time, I was facing imminent divorce after a separation and imminent job loss because my company was going through major restructuring. My boss of 7 years had just been laid off, and his boss had been laid off, who was the VP of people. So I could see the writing on the wall, and I was preparing for that, and full of stress. When one day in May 2008, my controller came to me and said, by the way, if you don't pay your Singapore taxes before you leave on July 2nd, you won't be allowed to board the plane. And my plane was scheduled on July 2nd. It was May. So somehow I had to find out from the Singapore IRS what my tax bill was going to be and pay it, or they wouldn't let me on the plane. So I was now panicked with feeling like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I have to leave. My visa will end on July 2nd. My condo won't be available. I have to somehow pay my taxes. And that just, and on top of that, you know, worrying about being laid off, I just snapped with stress at that moment. So my life was definitely in disruption and crisis. So now I want to show you the 4 conditions of a crisis. And are we sharing now, Anissa?
Yeah, if you can hit your share screen and then you can drive. There you go. We are, it looks like it's about to start.
Am I sharing my slides at this point? Ben?
Yes.
Just a minute.
Yeah, we can see your Zoom at the moment.
Okay, great.
I don't mind sharing if you don't have them up.
Great.
Okay, let me share mine then. If I miss
Go ahead and
the cue to move forward.
Sure.
Okay, so you have to stop
right
sharing in order for me to start sharing. So.
Okay, got it. Okay.
There we go. I think now I can share. All right, I've got my screen up. And you can see my screen now.
So I'll be telling you when the
4 conditions of a crisis.
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay, so I kind of go through point by point, Anissa. So the first is changes happen too rapidly to process and assimilate them. The second condition is demands are so big that you can't respond to and integrate them in a way that you can cope with them. The third condition is there's so much disruption in your daily routine that you can't function normally. And the fourth one is something snaps inside of you and then you just freeze and go numb. So you can't grow or change, or the ways you used to do it don't work for you. So these are 4 conditions, and only one condition has to be present to be called a crisis. I think we can all say that what we're experiencing now contains all of these points. I know I can with what we're experiencing now. And believe it or not, with the situation I described that I'm going to tell you more about later, how I worked through my emotions with that, what I'm experiencing now is actually more disruptive for me because it just feels so massive. It's worldwide and so global. So I want to ask you another question in a chat, everyone to just answer. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Anissa. In what ways have you been giving yourself time to feel your emotions during this last couple months? In what ways have you been giving yourself time to feel your emotions? And you might not have been, you might have been too busy. So if that's your answer, say, I haven't had time, or I've been avoiding my emotions, or I've been watching TV instead, or I've been talking to a friend about my feelings, or they come up when I'm in bed, or I'm practicing mindfulness or meditation or writing in a journal. What are all the ways?
Yeah, we've got some folks that are sharing with us.
yourself-
Joanne said talking to friends. Justine said walking in nature as part of the allowed exercise time, right?
I love you. Yeah. Listening to music, classical music.
Sheila says, I get my hugs from ice cream.
Oh my gosh, that's a... I love it. I've been doing that too. Provides comfort.
Yep.
Yeah, so great. Now, have you noticed emotions coming out
Cathy,
at the wrong times? Like, yes. Can you hear me? Yes. Can you hear me?
So I think the audio is coming in and out. Folks, if you have an issue, it could just be on my end. Let us know and we'll see if we need to make some adjustments. But I think we're good. I'm going to let you just do your thing because I think sometimes my audio may be glitching. So
okay, I hope that's the case. I hope people are hearing me. Paige hears me. So the problem is, if we go ahead and go to the next slide.
Okay.
Many of us aren't taught how to deal with our emotions. So this is kind of a new thing we have to actually think about doing. And, we're also, next point, we're not conditioned to do it. Like in school, at work, it's not really always socially acceptable to share our emotions, or ever in many cases. Now, there are two ineffective ways, two solutions, if you go to the next slide, that are ineffective of how we typically deal with our emotions. And the first is ignoring them. And this is very common and ineffective. We stuff them down and just avoid them. The second one is something I call inauthentic positivity. So that's when people say, well, I'm just going to be positive. So it includes the first one. You're ignoring your emotions, and then you slap on top of that, I'll just be positive instead. So in addition to ignoring, you're just saying, think positive, or look on the bright side, or don't worry, be happy. And you can say this to other people, and it sounds very admirable. But the problem with this approach, positive thinking, is it's thinking and not feeling. It's thinking and not feeling. So although it's important, of course, to be positive if you're a leader, I'm not saying I certainly think it's important to be positive, but it needs to be authentic, not fake. And so to really deal with our emotions, let's go to the definition of emotional agility. It's the ability to move easily and gracefully through your emotions. And let's go on to the next slide. This means being able to ride the ups and downs like ocean waves, or like the weather, how one day can be stormy, one day can be sunny, and to really be able to be with each of those emotions. It's managing your emotions and not trying to control them and stepping them down or denying them, and actually paying attention to them because they're there for a reason, and each of our emotions have a purpose. They're there to serve you. So how to deal with these emotions? Instead of stuffing them down, we manage them. And we do that by noticing them. Even that can be hard if we want to just ignore it. Noticing it. Do manage your outward response to avoid impacting others. And when you're alone, to actually feel, let yourself feel the emotion and feel through it. Because if you do that, then it actually lessens in intensity. That's the way to practice emotional agility. If you don't do that, then they'll just boil up like a boiling pot and explode when you least expect it. So let's go on to the next slide. On the rest of this talk, I'm going to talk about why it's important as individuals, why it's important in organizations to have emotional agility, and then I'll give some action steps for both. So let's go on. I want to use as an example the emotion of fear, because fear is what we're very, very common emotion during this pandemic. So let's talk about fear. Each emotion has different reactions for us. So fear, we get triggered when we feel threatened. That's when fear comes up. And this can be real or imagined. It doesn't, our bodies don't know even if we're imagining it, we'll start having that fear response. And it has physical effects on our body when we feel this. And by the way, right now, what are we threatened by? Death and dying. We're hearing about that every day. So even if we know whatever we're thinking about it, that's just automatically triggering something in our bodies. Our body is afraid of death and dying. And the impacts on the body is it increases our cortisol levels when it's constant. So that's where emotional agility comes in. If we don't pay attention to it and it's constant, it just keeps building up, and it affects our immune systems, our cardiovascular systems, our gastrointestinal systems. I think we all know this. Cortisol levels have a dangerous effect on our bodies, and it affects our brains. It impairs our long-term memory when we're constantly feeling this. We can't think clearly, and it affects our decision-making. And by the way, decisions made from fear are reactive. They're not proactive, because our body, our mind is responding to, oh, I just got to take care of the fear, instead of being able to look more long-term. So those are some of the effects of fear. Let's go on to the next slide. How do we work with that? And just as I said, emotions can teach us something too. So as I was saying earlier, if you can spend time alone and be with that fear and process it, just feel through its depth. And I assure you, it will start to dissipate if you allow yourself to feel it. Feel it. Don't fear the fear. Feel the fear. That's like
Got it. Yes. Feel it.
What it provides for us is, ironically, focusing on the present moment. If we work with it. That's why it was created biologically, for us to respond to danger in the moment. So to be with it, we can focus better. And then the next point is, in addition to being attentive and aware, it just helps us have courage. Courage doesn't even exist if we're not feeling fear. That's the definition of courage, is feeling the fear and working with it, being with it and being brave with your fear. So we can work with our fear. Being aware of it helps us do that. So let's go on to the impacts of avoiding fear. And as I said, it's constant. If you're avoiding it, it turns into anxiety. It's just anxiety in our body. Some people or some situations, if we don't have courage and face it, it turns into panic. So that's another result of avoiding it, or even terror. I hope this is making sense.
It is.
Yeah.
And at some point you're probably gonna get to this. I always say that, so I don't want to ask too soon. But naturally, we're talking to business leaders, we're talking to HR professionals. They A, have their own emotions, and B, they're also in charge of ensuring that their teams have emotional agility and manage their emotions. And at some point, I'm going to want to hear you talk about, how do you talk about this kind of conversation in that corporate environment? Because a lot of folks don't want. And even Joanne said, can you suggest, and she probably will suggest ways to deal with it. But a lot of us in that space, we're not allowed to talk about emotions or fear, or allowed may not be the right word. It's just it's taboo. So I'm sure you're going to help us apply this at work.
Absolutely. You're so right. You're so right. And that's what's really key. That's why I want to talk about this and help people and organizations talk about their emotions. This slide, I think, is just a recap of what we discussed. Just go through all the points here. Manage them instead of deny them. Don't get stuck. It impacts your health otherwise, and what it works. So let's go on to how does it show up in organizations? The next slide. And there was a very recent survey by SHRM that found 65% of employers said maintaining employee morale has been a challenge. Also, 35% are having changes in productivity. And this was a couple of weeks ago. This was before even additional layoffs have been happening. And then this was like late April. Half of employers saw an increase in requests for information about EAP assistance from their employees. Lots of people trying to get resources to help them emotionally. And I have one hot off the press. I just saw this morning in an email from DDI. Only 7% of HR professionals, only 7% think their organizations are very capable of preventing employee burnout in pursuit of profitable growth. You know, so I think that's showing that, you know, now companies are pretty, maybe even, hopefully not in panic mode, but they may be, you know, it's like, man, we've got to grow, and employees are feeling that, you know, that stress. Mm-hmm. So that's where it's showing up in organizations. And I'm going to talk about action steps now. I'm going to talk about individual action steps, and then I'll talk about organizational action steps and answer some of the questions that came up there. So how do you deal with it individually? The first step is to daily check in with your emotions. Daily, because they can build up, we get busy, we don't take time to do it, and we're so not aware of our emotions. So a really great step is to, in the morning is a great time for me, just do a daily check-in with your emotions. And then the second step, I did want to share Martin Luther King, with the example of fear. He even talked about this. Back in 1957, he was so wise. And he talks about fear, specifically facing fear. Basic importance is to get it out in the open. Life is full of secret fears. And if we don't master it, we're using our imagination. It's misuse of our imagination to create fears we're not even aware of. So he also talked about doing this daily, creating a practice. I'm not including the whole quote here, but he talks about making it a practice. Let's go on to the next point. Step 2 is to really feel the emotion that you're resisting, as I said before. So even step 1, to name your emotions in the daily check-in, is great. To step 2, to really feel if you have a deep emotion, is also great, because think about it like emotional hygiene. Like, we brush our teeth every day because the plaque builds up on our teeth every day, and we have to keep brushing. And this is what it's like to clean out our emotions. So every day we have new emotions. Like, remember, they're like waves, they're like the weather. So if we become agile of dealing with them, then we clear it out for the day, and we're more open for the day. And even the next day, the same emotion might come back in. That's fine, just like plaque, and just feel it, face it, and then we can move on with our day. And the step 3 is letting go of things you can't control, which is a huge help in dealing with your emotions and being agile, just being able to do that. And those first 2 steps help you to let go of what you can't control. And at this point, I want to share how I moved through my emotions in 2008, after I was in crisis and I didn't know what to do. So one morning, after hearing about this, I got to pay my taxes. How do I even know how to do it? And I went early one morning to a park near my condo, which was out by the ocean. And I just sat there and I let myself really feel it. I had been in anxiety. My jaw, I'd been grinding it every night. I had just been in that anxiety mode. And this time I really had all these fears about my job, about getting back home, taxes, and I just felt it. I felt the fears. I had my journal with me and I was like ready to write about it. And it just like, oh my gosh, oh, I'm just so fearful. I'm so afraid. I felt at the bottom and I cried. And then I felt peace. And I opened my journal and it was like automatically these words flowed through my pen and they're on the next slide. What came to me was, I thought they were on the next slide. I apologize. But I can tell you, and they might turn up later, but it was, anything will happen. You can't control what will happen. Anything will and can happen. So don't give up control. Give up control of what's happening. And I wrote that, it just like came straight through my hand. And I was like, wow, I felt such relief. Here they are. All your actions are your choice. So I realized I still can do what I want no matter what's happening to me. And it was just like a magical moment of hearing this voice telling me this. And then not only did I feel happier and in more control, it's such a paradox. By seeing I didn't have control, then I saw that I can control what I can control. It was just an amazing, unexplainable lightness that I felt. And then I got this idea, oh, I could just go down to the IRS building and just sit there until I get someone to tell me my taxes, which I did. So it opened me up for new ideas. So I think that part of letting go of control is really important, because we can just get so mired down and, oh, I've got to do this and got to do that. And you know what? You don't. I mean, it's just feel it and let it go. And then that present moment awareness will come to us. So those are my 3 steps for individual actions. And that last slide was about all the pandemics, the last century, wars. You know, we have not had those kinds of things lately. So we have to realize there are a lot of things that can happen that are out of control that are happening now. I know in my life I haven't seen anything like this. So it's just it's good to have that recognition of what we can't control.
Yeah, it's not a pleasant recognition, but somehow there is comfort in recognizing we survived that pandemic, we survived that world war, we survived that depression. We're resilient. If we can lose 85 million, you know, how do you even say that without choking up, and somehow come out the other side, we'll come out the other side on this also. Now, is that the one in 2018 and 19, that was a recent pandemic where 50,000 died?
Yes. The numbers really vary on that. I researched this. Some say more and some say.
Was that one of the SARS or Ebola or one of those?
That was the the Spanish flu.
Wow.
The Spanish flu.
And that's also something, you know, that I don't think many of us realize, is that other countries have recently really had massive disruption, and we're resilient as human beings. So
yes, yeah, this gives us perspective. So let's talk about organization. Oh, here's how I moved through it. By the way, that day in Singapore, okay, so I got that great idea, but then I thought, but I've been so stressed. I need to get on top of this. And I also had an idea to journal every day, because I had a lot coming up in the next month. I had to sell all my furniture. I had tons of work demands, tying things up. And I just thought, how am I going to get through the stress? And I just thought, I'm going to write every day in my journal, what am I grateful for now? And what do I want to happen today? I just had this idea to do that. And I did this for 30 days. And what do I want to happen today is about hey, you know what might happen? It just helped brighten me up to think of something that could happen, something I could have control over, could have a hand in. Like, do I want to connect more with people at work? Do I want to get exercise today? Do I want to go to bed early so I get a good night's sleep? You know, whatever it was, what do I want to happen? And here, I don't have this written on the slide, but at night, I did another check-in. What did happen? What was my happiest moment? And it was usually something different than what I wrote in the morning. So it's usually like, oh man, somebody responded to my request right away. so it was really, I'm seeing all kinds of things coming through the chat now too about writing. Writing is really a great way to process this. So I actually have a handout, a worksheet of checking in with my emotions and also doing this part, like how I want to live my day and being able to direct my emotions. And that's my freebie that I'm very happy to share with people at the end of this call.
Yeah, and here towards the end, we're going to share Cathy's email. And it's actually pretty easy, right? Isn't it Cathy at Cathy?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Cathy at CathyNorris.com, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we'll show that on the screen as well.
Yeah.
But yes, she's put together that worksheet and checklist, and we'll make sure that you have access to that. So I think, I know, because I can see your next slide, this is where you're going to start helping us. So in my mind, I'm always thinking about, okay, we work with a lot of executives, and even executives that understand the business case for emotional agility, understand the business case for making sure your employees don't get burned out. The numbers speak for themselves. Now, even if most people understand that, 93% are like, either we don't do it well, or perhaps we don't understand the connection between emotions and performance, emotions and retention, emotions and business success. And I know now you're going to talk to us about that, because all I can hear is the back of my head going, yeah, like I'm going to tell I'm going to go into my meeting and say, how are y'all feeling today with my executive?
Well, it's not like that
right?
at all. No.
Right.
No. And I do want to say, even for leaders, and I've worked with leaders on daily check-ins. So that, again, this is on the individual level, but we get really stressed out as leaders. My gosh, talk about employee stress. And what about leaders? And who has time to do it? So helping a leader through the daily check-in process. I helped a leader with that who actually was in all kinds of crisis. I was going to share that, and if we have time at the end, I will, but I know we want to get to, well, what can we do for our employees? So we can do that individually with leaders, but what can you as a leader or an HR professional help your employees process their emotions and be aware of them? And the benefits of that are going to be humongous. So one is to make emotional deposits, and that is simply in a conversation with someone, or actually intentionally, how are you doing? That's it. How are you doing? And I suggest like picking someone every day and just giving them a call while we're still remote working, or if you're together, intentionally reaching out every day to someone. How are you doing? Know what, can you get this for me? Or I need that. Just how are you doing?
You know, Joanne just put something in the chat box that was mirroring my thoughts, which was oftentimes people feel intimidated to answer that question, especially if they're not used to a manager caring. You know, if a manager starts asking someone who they don't even know basically their last name, let alone, their family or what's going on, how do you manage that?
I get that. And that's where it really helps for you as you to just share how you've been doing first.
Yeah.
And to be vulnerable, that is a really great quality of a leader, is to be vulnerable and go first and say, this has been really hard for me. And I know a lot of days I feel, go ahead and name an emotion that you've been feeling. Sometimes I feel really sad, or sometimes I'm angry, or sometimes I'm anxious. Whatever it is, it's okay, right? You want to make it okay so the employee feels like it's okay. So that can really help.
So you're saying managers that know that they need to develop their own emotional agility as well as develop that in their employees, they've got to start by modeling the way
Yes.
so
Yeah.
that it's not so intimidating. How are you doing? You know?
Yeah, I kind of, you know, maybe the
Love
way
that.
I come that is just really in and maybe even at the end of a conversation, but just, hey, I just want to know how you're doing.
But I think you
Don't
just
make
hit
it
it.
sound, yeah.
It's an authentic, you used that word earlier. It's an authentic dialogue, showing genuine compassion and empathy by modeling the behavior. And in doing that, I'm taking away from this conversation that we're planting seeds for employees to be able to manage their emotions and know that it does matter to their manager, et cetera.
Yeah, that's it. Overwhelmed, that would be a big one, right? So, you know, you could share you're overwhelmed too. Yeah. So peer sharing is another thing you could do. So this is providing a structure to help it happen. But the research shows, there's been some research done with employees who are doing this pretty much the same thing and in the same group. And they have that camaraderie of work, but they've never had an opportunity to talk about their emotions and their feelings. They've probably never had time, or it just wasn't, you know, wasn't part of the work. But to make it, to set up times to say, hey, we just want to spend time being real with each other and taking a break from work. And and you can decide how you want to do it. You could ask people to volunteer or take, I think that would work best. You say, who would you like to connect with for the next few weeks, and even set up times. I just think the structure is helpful. And this is actually a person, Aaron Hurst, recommends this. Aaron Hurst, Hurst. There was a great article about how he's been doing this. And just share how you're feeling. So just kind of making it okay to set up this structure. Take some time this week, and, you know, maybe not set up this time, but just make sure, you know, tell me how it went. Just something like that to just help it happen.
You keep saying, I think that is a smaller hurdle sort of to jump over for many in HR and many leaders is it may be about emotions, but you're really asking, how are you doing? What's up for you? How are you managing this? And that, as opposed to tell me about your feelings, feels less, oh, we're going to have a therapy session. Is that
Sure.
what you're sharing? Okay.
Yeah, I would like to make that. Thanks for bringing that up. We're not talking about therapy, and make it sound, you know, just see how you're doing. Yeah. No, it's not about therapy. Just the act of talking about how you're feeling. It's amazing. It can really relieve a lot. And actually, there was a research done on this, and they measured cortisol levels, and in this study, before and after peers had conversation, the cortisol levels went down.
Wow.
Physical.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised. In theory, we can, we'll find the research to back it up. In theory, you know, we conceptually understand why this would be valuable. And Joanne just said, well, I'm not so sure about peer-to-peer. Maybe we could do a team of HR or counselors. And I want to ask you about that. And I want to share that in some of our more effective programs, they have peer-to-peer, what we call peer-to-peer accountability groups, but it can also, another title that we use is peer-to-peer shared intelligence. And under the guise of peer collaboration, under the guise, and guise makes it sound like we're not being authentic, but the purpose is shared intelligence, shared support. And with sufficient facilitated skills, the dialogue does become supportive. How are you doing? What can we do to support you? What can the organization do differently? How can we solve problems together? It,
Mhm.
what I know that you do, and you're probably going to share with us compassion circles. Is that
Yeah,
what that does?
absolutely. Absolutely. And so the principle is the same as what I shared in the individual. It's it's thinking about, whoa, what am I feeling? It's that simple. What, just being able to talk about it in our busy, busy lives, we don't do that. And this is just helping employees do that. Finding a way, and no, don't make it sound like therapy at all. No, no, it's just like, oh, let's just talk about how we're doing. Just talk about non-work, what's, whatever, what's going on with you. And the compassion circles I've started doing. So this is another strategy. This is what we're talking about, Anissa. It's a group, and so these are all different approaches you can try. Having a weekly meeting of a small group, 20 is getting large, but 5 to 10, 12 people on a Zoom call at this time if we're still remote. Actually, a Zoom call is probably always good, or even a phone call. It doesn't have to be video. And just share, again, how you're doing. And man, this is just amazing. People just listen to each other and, oh yeah, I'm feeling that too. It's facilitated. I facilitate them to help everyone who has time. Sometimes you don't even have time for everyone, but still people really connect because they're seeing that we're feeling the same thing, oh my gosh. And then you're practicing compassion just by listening in a different space than we're normally in our work, day-to-day work. And people who are sharing, they're practicing self-compassion to be heard.
Yep.
And that alone is so healing. And it provides connection and bonds. It's just amazing. When I started doing this, if you want to show the next slide, these are some of the unsolicited comments I started getting about just, oh my gosh, just talking with each other, what it did for them.
I love this. It was so amazing to be able to truly talk about how I feel. I'm so grateful. That's a demonstration of the outcomes when people feel supported, even though they may not know going into this circle, we're all going to share our feelings and we're all going to come out, I had my moment with my teddy bear as the focus of the group because the challenge for a lot, whether we like it or not, the challenge in the corporate space is emotions and therapy it's not cool. We don't need group therapy. And I even agree with that, right? I think you're shaking your head. You agree too.
Yeah.
I want to read something that we've got in the chat. Justine and Heidi had two really good comments that I think you're going to really like. And Justine wrote, "It's interesting how we react to the word emotion in the corporate world as a word, yet emotions are going on in every meeting. Someone humiliates you publicly, you feel anger or sadness. You work with a team who are creative and fun, you feel hope and trust. The emotions are there all the time, yet we don't talk about them at work." And she says, I say all that to say I like the peer-to-peer idea. And then Heidi, I think, answers the question about how do you keep this from being, group therapy. She writes, "Yes, the peer-to-peer is great. Our teams do Zoom calls regularly. How are you doing? Has been very helpful in our organization during this time, even remotely across the country."
And part of the facilitation is keeping it to sharing. No, not that people start trying to fix anyone or provide advice. It's all about sharing.
So it's not about fixing, it's about sharing. Yeah. And it's not feelings may come up, but how are you doing is a safer question than how are you feeling?
Yeah.
Is that right? I mean,
yeah.
I'm not an expert on that.
I need to change. I might have feeling on my slide. That really makes sense. In some environments, that could be, awesome.
So I have a question. How do you keep it from turning into, what if someone shares something devastating, maybe they've got suicidal thoughts or what have you. How does an organization manage that?
This is where it's helpful to have someone practiced in leading, like a coach, to lead the group. But even, I don't know if HR, to have someone on your staff who can listen for something that sounds like it does require therapy, which would be depression, deep depression or suicidal. Absolutely, you need to then take those steps to help them seek help. That's if it's that, like that. If it's somebody really feeling and feeling free at sharing, well, I mean, it could just come upon them, crying. Absolutely. And this too is just part of letting them share. So again, the help of a coach who can be with that. And what I've seen in doing this is that the others can too. It really, so the coach or someone who has experience being with emotions can hold that space and allow people to be able to express when it comes out. It's a great skill.
And the benefit, that the case you're making for this is that, yes, it's uncomfortable, but the fact is we're going through a pandemic. The fact is that, 93% of our HR folks, even before this, didn't feel like we could help people not have burnout, and talk about this is a time for massive anxiety and stress. And so the business case for this is, even though you and I and our team or folks here, we're talking about emotions, what we're really talking about is supporting your people through one of, if not potentially for them, the most devastating time in the history of our lifetimes.
And by doing this, my vision is that we learn how to deal with our emotions in companies, as a society. They're okay, they're acceptable. We can move through them to be more productive. Think about how relieved you would feel as an employee to know it's okay to have an emotion. Think about that psychological safety you can have and how much more productive they will be because of that.
On that same line, and forgive me, I don't remember the study, but it was a recent survey, and it showed that 93% of employees do not feel like their company understands what they're going through or has helped them through this time. And I said yesterday or the day before that strikes me as amazing, because every company that I know, every company that we're working with is proactively addressing this issue. And yet there's a disconnect with how it's playing out in employees' experience.
And if you want to have trust, if you want employees to trust their leaders, or their organization especially, it's just critical to be able to allow them to see them as humans with their emotions.
Wow.
We can move through them.
Yeah. Without it being therapy.
Yes.
Well, I want to make sure folks know how to get a hold of you. I want to also read what Justine wrote. She said, employees are craving sharing how they feel. They do that at the water cooler and over lunch with a trusted colleague. Sharing in a more structured way could start off awkward, but grow into something more natural and valued. Has that been your experience also?
Yeah, it has been. So I've been working with the group for 5 weeks now, and that's the other beauty of doing a compassion circle, is how the bond just gets stronger every week.
So it's okay that it might start off awkward or uncomfortable, but then over time the trust gets built.
Yeah, it's like any other, it's like other skills. We get more comfortable. We develop that comfort level.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, I know that we are coming up to the end, and I want folks to know, this is your email, Cathy at cathynorris.com, and you can see on the screen there, 775-232-3394 is Cathy's phone number. That emotional agility checklist, she'll be happy to send that to you. Tell us a little bit about why organizations hire you and what you do with organizations.
As you mentioned, I've also have a certification in conversational intelligence, which is another thing that I do with organizations to help leaders, managers, supervisors, frontline supervisors learn how to just have conversations that help their employees be more productive. And I don't even mean it that way. It's like having conversations. And kind of my story too is that I was always task focused, even in learning and development. It was just always, okay, I'm task focused, got to develop this training, and not learning how to have conversations, not thinking about how to have open-ended conversation to open other people up. So that's one of the things that I do a lot with organizations is coaching and workshops to help supervisors and new leaders see how to do that.
How to get more out of their teams.
Yeah.
Be passionate leaders, be conversationally intelligent leaders.
Yes.
Okay. Well, excellent. This has been really great. I want to say thank you guys for joining us and share a little bit also about why you might reach out to Turnkey Coaching Solutions. Cathy, as well as some of our other coaches around the country, have put together a variety of crisis relevant training programs. And throughout the duration of our collective crisis, we're doing buy one, get one, so that two teams instead of one can benefit from the virtual training. And if you know that you have opportunities to continue learning and development, or more specifically, supporting your employees through this time, reach out. We would love to have the opportunity to explore that with you. And unfortunately, we know that a lot of our clients are also having to look at outplacement services and compassionate layoffs. Our programs are incredibly scalable and affordable. And just like all of our other programs right now, we've put together the pandemic specials. So to reach out to Turnkey, I am always happy to have a complimentary consultation with or without, us doing business. I know that it's just the right way to show up right now. So I would welcome that opportunity. So Cathy, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
And thank you everyone for joining us, and stay safe and healthy.
Yes, stay well.
Thank you guys. Stay safe and healthy. Take care. Bye-bye.